Hello, Culture Matters podcast. We are back again with another culture content. Follow me, Jay Doran _ the Culture Man on Instagram for weekly, consistent videos. I'm out of breath because I just did 20 push-ups. Promised myself I would do 20 push-ups before each podcast. And boy, is that a commitment. So follow me, Jay Doran _ the Culture Man on Instagram for daily videos, weekly, every other day videos. However often we post them on business, leadership, life, culture, etc. And today I want to talk about, I want to elaborate on one of the topics, which is uh, what I learned in my first job. You may not know this story about my first job, but there are things that I learned in my first job that I actually used throughout my career, and I think made me the man I am today. And I would say maybe in your own life, there are things you don't even realize that you learned in your first job that could be using today. The biggest thing that sticks out first is starting a conversation with a stranger. It's funny, the T in culture matters. One of the T's is talk. Don't be afraid to talk to a stranger. Everyone has a story to be heard. Talk. I'm pretty sure that's the value. Just second guess myself. But everyone has a story to be heard. So I'm living in Nutley. I'm living in Nutley, New Jersey until I'm not. I decided to leave home at 18 after having a blackout blow up fight with the woman who saved my ass, mom, Barbara. Episode 242 on the Culture Matters podcast. Go listen to that episode on the Culture Matters podcast, and this is going to make a heck of a lot more sense. And I don't remember, maybe I was in fight or flight. What do? You leave home. Of course, I was invited back. Unconditional love was definitely the case in that scenario, but I made a decision. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. Stupid decision. That's the decision that was made. A great friend of mine at the time who was interested in becoming more healthy. They had just, I think, broken up with a love interest, something of that nature. And at that time in my life, I was in a great sense, in a spiritual sense, maybe. I was what I am today as an advisor, but not in a business context, a culture context, a leadership context, an organizational architectures context, business theory and all podcast and events and all these things context, authorship and reading and writing. And no, I didn't do think about any of those things. I was a inspirational exercise guru. Got guys much older and much younger would come to me for conversation around working out, for uh, the philosophy, because I really embodied. Epictetus said, "Don't teach your philosophy, embody it," something to that effect. My whole life at that point really was a consistent effort of pushing, like Sisyphus pushing that boulder up the mountain. Albert Camus imagining Sisyphus being happy when that boulder comes all the way down the mountain, and Sisyphus to start all over again. Ultimately, what I'm saying here is I worked out constantly and embodied the spirit of getting better, was excited about it, enthusiastic, and the things I was excited and enthusiastic about, oftentimes people would come to me with questions, with concerns, with their personal story, and I'd want to help them. Now I'm in a position at that time in life where I need help. I've got a friend who also desires help in being around someone that can motivate them, inspire them to take more seriously their exercise, their eating. I mean, people saw me not do other things kids, our age were doing and enjoying because I had to go to the gym or I had to bring my food or I was dogmatic about it. I mean, I was clean. I didn't experiment with any performance enhancing technologies, which unfortunately later on in my career in the exercise gripped me and kind of distracted me from my potential. Topic for another day. But I was the feedback that I got from others was that I was inspiring and a mentor in that capacity. So long story longer, I have nowhere to live, and my friend has a problem. Well, it's a business, a vision to a solution of a problem. And so I got a couch to sleep on with the opportunity to, for my counterpart, my friend, to take their health more seriously, work out more, eat better, an accountability partner. Little did I know, you know, 15, 16 years later, that I'd be doing the same thing, of course, in a different context, as an advisor of culture and a founder of a consulting nationwide consulting firm working in almost 2 dozen states, and half, more than half a dozen with regularity, that I'd be doing the same thing with founders, CEOs, but in a different context, in a business context. It's unbelievable to think about, like our destinies call us to things. And I hope that you listening, you found your destiny, or at least are in the process of uncovering it, even if you haven't recognized it yet. But I was doing the same thing. And so this person had chosen me to be their accountability partner. And now I have a place to stay. Well, when I was staying there, it was a time when two things happened. I got my first job. I was living in Cedar Grove now, which wasn't even allowed, and going to my second high school Nutley High School in northern New Jersey, and commuting 25 minutes. I had a car by the grace of God and a mentor, role model, father figure of mine that co-signed my first car, my uncle, mom's adopted mother's sister's husband, very much a patriarch for me for the first 12 years, heavily, very exemplary of values and success, and lesser so after, in the teens. But I had a car because somebody that had success put their word, their credit, their name on my name, gave me that opportunity, or else I would not have had a car. We did not have the resources. I would not have been able to move. I would not have been able to experience what I'm about to share with you, and we wouldn't be having this podcast right now. So fascinating how everything's connected. And so I'm staying at a friend's house. I meet another patriarchal figure at that time, which is my friend's father. He had two sons, one older, one younger. The younger is the one I was motivating to exercise, and their accountability partner, their implicit culture advisor without the culture yet. And just commuting to school that 25, 30 minutes, not taking, unfortunately, school seriously or bringing books or backpacks or anything like that, but showing up. It was right around that time I got my first job, because I came late. I was a late bloomer when it came to work. I didn't put my ambition into action until there was absolutely no other option. But then once I did, it was multiple jobs all at once and kind of all in, obsessive, just like everything else I tend to do, like this podcast. And so that first job was actually the bouncer, or a bouncer, a security, because now I'm really juiced up, and I mean that literally, actually. And unfortunately, too young, I succumbed to, or had succumbed to the peer pressures and the idolatry, the envy and the covetousness. I was just reading the Ten Commandments the other day randomly. The desire to be bigger, stronger, faster, and a new environment, and like be cool and be something that I absolutely am not. And I was getting into those pro hormones. Now I'd already been working out from about 11 and a half or 12 every day till now 18. Um, and I was big. And when already like very consistent for all those years, every single day, it's all I thought about other than World of Warcraft, another podcast. And you add those performance enhancers in there. Now you don't even look like a high schooler, you look like an adult. And so my first job was at a really successful nightclub in Clifton, New Jersey. I think it was Bliss or something like that. And it was unbelievable. It was a completely different world for a antisocial or yeah, antisocial a video game addict workout freak. It was like one of those workout. It's like Henry Cavill as somebody I admire. He is a superstar, movie star, very great shape, handsome guy that plays a tremendous amount of video games. And there's a handful of other UFC fighters that are huge Warcrafters, and they're out there. You don't hear about them much, but that's what was me. It was like you could see me coming from a mile away with the physique, but all I did outside of the gym was play video games and just show up to school without books and book bags. Had friends in every group, just like this podcast. There's all different people on the podcast. I like to have everyone from every um, walk of life is welcome. I'll take interest in them, and that's who I've always been. But that first job is as a security, like a bouncer, essentially. Now, this is where the two stories collide, where I'm living with my friend Jordan, who had me as his anchor, accountability, health and fitness mentor, in that, and where I can stay somewhere and I have a place to live. I'm estranged from my parent at that given time, unfortunately, and of course, I become like another son, or at least that's how it felt with his father, who was funny and smart and, yeah, clever, witty, quick, intentional, present, hardworking, just an awesome, interesting guy. And now at this time, so this is where these two stories collide. I'm bouncing at night, I think twice a week, maybe, sleeping later, sleeping in later, or working later, sleeping in later, be coming to school less, later, and half zombie while I'm there. That's causing a lot of conflicts. Having an unbelievable time at this job. This guy, we're on this podcast. And this patriarchal new mentor figure is taking a liking interest in me, the relationship I have with his son and his sons, as this very determined, obsessive. I went all in with anything that I ever did, all in to the point where it was a blessing and a curse. And the workout culture that I exemplified. Everybody would always talk to me about it because that's what they could see that I was passionate about. And at this time, I start, bringing women, like girls, back to the house, dates, girlfriends, whatnot. And Juan Carlos says, we got to have dinner. Like, I really want to have dinner with you and talk to you and see how you're doing. And I remember we had this dinner, and he pulls out these audiobooks called Double Your Dating, David D'Angelo, and shares how his soulmate of many, many years had unfortunately been taken from him. That devastated the family. And I know because my best friend at the time, lost his mom, and this patriarch of mine lost their wife, and how tough to cancer, and how tough and unbelievable and unimaginable that is to come back from a dating perspective. But he invested at one point, after taking time away, to learn how to talk to the opposite sex and to date. And he's telling me this story, like, learn how to talk to women again. And there's these audiobooks that had helped him. And of course, at the time that I saw his current girlfriend at the time, she was 10 out of 10, or 20 out of 10 for somebody, like me, socially awkward. I was like, wow, clearly something's working here. I never forget that dinner. We had this dinner. He told me a story, and he gave me these tapes. I still have them to this day. It's like a few dozen audiobooks on men that didn't know how to talk to women. And it was riddled, these books were riddled in psychology and neuroscience and case study. And I'd never really discovered or I lost my interest of learning early on, around seventh grade for like, I kind of checked out. Sixth grade, I was really an academic, then lost it, refocused it to the exercise and the games, and regained it. Like, wow, I can learn. I would drive to school, that second school, and listen to those tapes. And coincidentally, my first job is at a nightclub. At a nightclub. I'm thrown into the melting pot of having to talk to strangers, not just women, but men. And this is where the first thing I learned at my job is de-escalation. There's a couple things. Men too, de-escalating fights, being able to stop fights before they happen as a consequence of my innate temperament, I like when people like each other and love each other and get along. But learning these tapes were more than just, for what I heard was deeper, wasn't just vain, aesthetic sales pitches or something. It was a context, the nuance, a frame, how to show up and not show up, and some of these things are transferable. I picked up transferable starting conversations as much as de-escalating a conflict. So in the nightclub world, there's a lot of sexual energy. And that sexual energy manifests into aggression on the male side. Fights will be started. Fights will be started below the awareness of the men as a marker of superiority, and it's either a consequence of frustration of sexual oppression, or as a response to an affront on their stature, on their dominance, on their power. So fights pop up all the time, and bouncers instigate them because there's the types of people that are attracted to that role or tend to be more aggressive people. I uh, uh yeah, and I'm basing that on speculation, experience, books, and you can test that yourself by starting, acting a fool at a club, at a bar, or what have you. You're going to see how that security person confronts you. They're trained killers. They're uh, some a small minority are law enforcement of some degree or past, but a majority are just big, scary, tough, unreasonable, and the ones that are more trained and less just tough are more. There's a coordinate connection with um, humility and patience and de-escalation. The ones that are less trained but are experienced in weights and fights and things, higher likelihood of escalation. So I learned de-escalation. I learned talking to strangers. I learned the first night that I ever had a job. Remember, I'm studying, I'm learning, I'm thinking about how I can date up, because the feedback I'm getting is that I'm not living my potential as far as my dating life, bringing less than ideal mates to my friend's house, and his dad coaching me through that as a mentor. So I'm mentoring his son and working out and leading by example in that way. He's mentoring me in the art of self-respect and self-esteem, and attempting to give me some feedback, because I didn't have any. I wasn't listening to anyone. I wasn't getting any from anybody at that point in a patriarchal or matriarchal sense. And he was giving me that and giving me those tapes. And that started my self-development journey, really. Those audio books. Who would have thought that today I'd be almost at 12,000 hours of listening time in Audible on an account that's about 8 years old? Who would have thought? Who would have thought I'd have almost 5,000, just under 5,000 audiobooks, majority of them paid for, because there's some free ones they give you and then they try to upsell you. But basically, definitely 4,000 of them 40, yeah, high 4,000s have been invested in. So significant investment into my Audible account over the last almost decade. Who would have thought that that would have started with these tapes and this homelessness leading to opportunity from my skill set at the time and my network? Who would have thought that I'd be my first job in a very exciting nightclub, huge in the thousands of people that would come to it, and the first night of my ever first job would be New Year's Eve, guarding there was a female, there was a women's bathroom that had an entryway outside, and then there's an entryway to the women's bathroom where there's a hole, and then there's the women's bathroom door, like totally separate, way far away from the men's bathroom. And I was like in that vestibule, and just surrounded by unbelievable potential mates, according to my patriarch at the time that gave me these audiobooks, with an opportunity to strike conversation. And that same night, learning the hard way the value of de-escalation, as I remember getting punched in the face by somebody in a massive fight that broke out, because fights would break out all the time. And so as I started learning about the brain and psychology and the approaching strangers, which that then tied to sales and the sales books that I started reading and the business books that came from that, and the how to win friends and influence people and the thinking or rich, and all of it was connected. So I wrote down some thoughts here. Don't hit first. Don't underestimate the power of a smile, whether it's approaching someone to de-escalate. You see a fight is about to break out. Hey guys, it's all right. Your open body language, smile, look people in the eyes, but not too long. Maybe tap them on the back. Like, you're cool, they're cool, the energy's down. There's the implicit, hey, you know, we have nukes and we'll use them, but we're not going to use them. What's going on? You're right. So, don't underestimate the value of a smile. Don't hit first. De-escalation takes an open heart, a kind heart. And the power of proximity. That's the last thing I learned. You got to be in the room where it happens for the opportunity to be had. I was in the room where it happened. I was in that vestibule and had an opportunity for volume, for conversations, for connections. And I got to practice all those books at that night for sure. And in that job as a bouncer, because you get a lot of people come up to you and talk to you especially if you are built well and you are, even if you're not aesthetically attractive, bouncers get hit on or opened on constantly by people. So men and women. And I don't want to offend anyone, but yeah, that would be the first. Those are some traits that I learned at my first job as a bouncer at a nightclub while in high school on a tremendous amount of testosterone, which I don't recommend. I recommend staying away from that, and definitely go to your doctor and have a conversation. If you're old and you feel decrepit and a loser, you might have other problems that actually you could solve that versus taking drugs to compensate for your insecurities. So that would be my advice on that for the old people listening to this that are thinking about taking steroids, like, because TRT is steroids. Go to your doctor and have a real conversation. Hire a psychologist. You might be a therapist. It may not be your test levels. It may be your philosophy that's holding you back, not just that. So that's one thing I could tell you. And don't underestimate the value of a smile. Don't hit first. Power of de-escalation. It comes down to an open heart, body language, intention, listening, not reacting, and put yourself in the room. You have to be within proximity for the opportunity. You want to, as Charlie Munger would say, you want to fish, you want to shoot in a barrel of fish to catch a fish, not just fish in the ocean. You want to fish in a barrel of fish versus a whole ocean. Follow me, Jay Doran _ the Culture Man on Instagram. Leave us a review in the Culture Matters podcast. Share this with a friend. We'll see you next time.